I know that there will be more people drifting in, but we'll get underway. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Payton. It's my privilege to serve as Dean of the Faculty of Law and to welcome you this afternoon to a Faculty of Law debate sponsored by our Magna Carta project. And I'll turn it over to the Magna Carta project in a moment. But for those of you who haven't been following it, the various tweets, the website postings, and the like, this is an extraordinary group of students who, in celebration of the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta, have undertaken really by the time they're done, it'll be over a year of celebration about what the Magna Carta is and means for law and for democracy. I had the privilege in June of actually being part of the American Bar Association's London sessions, which was a celebration of the Magna Carta in England, saw one of the original documents, and it will be coming here to Edmonton at the end of November, so there are a number of other events on this fall, and I encourage you to go see it. But more importantly, to educate yourselves about the importance of the Magna Carta and its legacy for us in a free and democratic society. The impact that it's had across the ages, across the globe, is nothing short of extraordinary. And I really appreciate my Vice Dean Moinyaya's approach with the Law and Social Media class and the Magna Carta project. What you're doing is just incredible. Getting mentioned in Parliament, celebrating everything from analyses of parliamentary proposed legislation, right on through to dub poetry, right on through to, well, you name it, it's up there. It's a wonderful opportunity to learn about the importance of the Magna Carta, to celebrate who we are as a democracy, and through your participation today, to be part of that democratic instrument. I'm not going to go on any longer because you have an MC. Vanessa's going to come up here in a moment. I caution and note that the debate is being held under the auspices of the Magna Carta project here at the Faculty of Law, that there is no particular endorsement of any candidate, any party, or any position during the election, and that the Faculty of Law is very pleased to offer a platform for discussion of these important issues. So I congratulate the students for their organization. I thank the candidates for coming in today to be part of this experience, and thank all of you for actually attending this afternoon. I hope you enjoy the next hour. Vanessa, over to you.
Thank you, Dean Payton. Welcome everyone to the Edmonton Strathcona Candidates Faculty of Law debate. I'm Vanessa. I'll be your MC this afternoon. I'd like to thank you all for attending this event, which, as the Dean mentioned, is part of the U of A's celebration of the Magna Carta. I'm one of 5 members of a Law and Social Media class, which is supervised by Vice Dean Yaya, and which is responsible for a series of events this semester. So the rules of debate are as follows. The winner of the coin toss will give a brief intro limited to 2.5 minutes. Next candidate will follow with her intro. I will then ask the first question. First candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. Second will have 2 minutes to respond. And the first candidate will have a minute to rebut. The time limits will be strictly enforced, and I will flash time cards at 1 minute and 15-second intervals. The candidate who answered the first question will then answer second for question 2, and etc. At the end of the predetermined questions, the candidates will take questions from the floor and will be limited to 1 minute for response. I'd like to introduce the 2 candidates. Linda Duncan is a U of A alum who was elected as a Member of Parliament for Edmonton in 2008. Prior to that, she worked in international environmental law as a consultant and a senior legal counsel. Eleanor Olszewski is also a U of A law alum who was appointed Queen's Counsel in 2007. She also studied pharmacy at the U of A and was a sessional instructor in that faculty. She's currently a practicing lawyer and partner at MLT. I'll now invite the coin toss winner, Ms. Olszewski, to elaborate on her bio, followed by Ms. Duncan.
So I can make some introductory remarks at this point. Thank you. I'm very honored to be here as the federal Liberal candidate for Edmonton Strathcona, and I'd like to thank the Vice Dean as well as the law students for hosting this debate. And I think a celebration of the Magna Carta in conjunction with the federal election is basically the perfect time to get together to talk about democracy and government. I've indicated, or am a partner at MLT, head of the litigation department, and a person might wonder why I would have decided to become involved in politics at this point. And I just really quickly want to tell you a couple of reasons why I did this. And there's, first of all, really is my fundamental belief in the importance of role models for women. And I know that few women consider politics, and they think they aren't good enough for one, they think they're not smart enough, or they're afraid. And we need to change that. We need to have the active participation of women at all levels of decision making, and that's just absolutely essential to the achievement of democracy. So the second reason I'm running is I am really concerned about where this country is going, and I'm concerned that democracy and our democratic institutions are being just chipped away and eroded by the Conservative government. And I'm worried that we'll wake up one day and we won't even recognize our country. In my view, the current government is profoundly anti-democratic, and the government bullies the judiciary when it makes rulings that protect individual rights and freedoms. Prime Minister Harper has dismantled the long-form census when that's a source for us of much data and information that helps us make sound policies for the governance of our country. His candidates are not permitted to appear in forums such as this one today, so that Canadians can hear what they have to say and question their views. In my view, we need to rid ourselves of this culture of control and partisan advantage, and I do believe that it is Mr. Trudeau, with his message of optimism and openness and respect for all Canadians, who can provide us with the inspiration and the positive politics that I believe that our country needs at this point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to the law school for sponsoring this debate. I think it'll be one of several that will occur on campus. I'm very proud that I'm a U of A law grad, arts and law grad. I also hold an LLM from Dalhousie. In addition to working internationally, I've always also was the first Chief of Enforcement for Environment Canada and was the first Head of Law and Enforcement for the NAFTA Environment Commission and was the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Yukon. So I have long worked in the area of advocacy for rights for Canadians, particularly the right to be heard in resource development. You've chosen, I agree with Eleanor, you've absolutely chosen the appropriate theme for this election, and in my mind, the erosion or protection of our basic rights and opportunities. So bang on to the law school and to the students who have been doing this project. This is the key matter for this election. You will hear talk about lots of other issues, which are of course important, the economy and so forth. But this is the key issue that runs through everything that matters on the Hill. We're making decisions about your future, and particularly law students as they move forward to be active members of the bar or the judiciary or to run for office. The point is, will Canadians choose the path of continued erosion of basic rights, benefits for the wealthiest, and disrespect for our judicial and international institutions? Or will they choose a party that bases its decisions on overriding principles, not the latest polls? By way of example, the Unfair Elections Act may prove a significant factor in who actually gets elected. I encourage you to go out and exercise your franchise. Our privacy and security rights are being jeopardized. There's failed transparency on everything from Afghan detainees to trade with human rights violators. Scientists have been silenced. The Conservative government has failed to deliver its treaty obligations to protect Indigenous women. They have failed miserably in responding to the refugee crisis. It's time for a government that respects the provinces and territories, our First Nations, our judiciary, the rule of law, and the right of all Canadians to benefit from a more inclusive and diversified economy. Thank you.
Thank you.
First question. Given that it is the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta, what does the Magna Carta mean to you as a lawyer and as a political candidate?
In my view, the Magna Carta actually it's an amazing source of fascination for me, because really what I understand from history is that King John was basically threatened into signing the document by his noblemen. So it's not as if he woke up one day and decided to be benevolent and to provide the nobility with additional rights and freedoms. And more interestingly, too, is that he basically repudiated that document within a really short period of time after it was signed. But somehow, notwithstanding that, this document laid down principles of justice that have echoed through the centuries. And, I know that some have argued that really the Magna Carta is no more to us in modern times than maybe the subject matter for a Monty Python skit. But to better thinkers, I think, the other side of the coin is that it is, in fact, democracy's birth certificate. As a lawyer, I think one of the most fundamental aspects of the Magna Carta to me is freedom from unlawful imprisonment without cause or evidence. And there has to be a fair system of justice following due process, the right to be tried by one's peers, which is a fundamental concept in the Magna Carta, and the right to a speedy trial. And I think the words that embody that are magnificent, and it is, to no one will we sell, to no one deny or delay right or justice. As a politician, apart from a lawyer, the most important part of the Magna Carta to me is the rule of law, that the state cannot do what it wants. The Magna Carta limited the king's power, and it prevented him from acting arbitrarily, and that's fundamentally important to our society. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I congratulate again the students for having this as the opening topic and the theme for the debate. But I have to say, this is a joke between myself and the woman who has had me elected twice over, is, as a true Scot, I am equally excited about the Declaration of Arbroath. Why is there a big difference between the Magna Carta and the Declaration of Arbroath? Well, while there are important principles, of course, dealing with the rule of law and access to justice in the Magna Carta, we have to remember that those rights were only going to be extended to the elite. Now, over time, to the credit, the governments of the world, particularly the United States, Canada, other European nations, and the United Nations, through the United Nations Declaration of Rights, have adopted these principles so that they are applied to all of the electorate. I say that's important because we have a government in place right now that is, in fact, increasingly restricting rights to only some people. For example, in the environmental assessment process, majority of Canadians can't participate anymore, even if their community is impacted. That includes First Nations. When we're talking about basic rule of law and rights, we need to bring it down to the ground of the kinds of issues that impact us. We look at the trade deal being negotiated right now, where the government refuses to disclose the human rights violations and how they've considered those. So it's important to take a document like the Magna Carta, like the Declaration of Arbroath, and consider how we want to have those applied in day-to-day decisions by our governments. I did that with the Environmental Bill of Rights, which I twice tabled in the House of Commons. And what that does is extend those very rights to decision-making so that government's held accountable for the decisions they make, and citizens have the right to hold the government accountable. So, yes, let's watch for what's going to happen with our charter rights, and especially in C-51.
I guess the comment that I would add to what's already been said is that there are some who would argue that we haven't fulfilled the goals and objectives that were set out in the Magna Carta. And there are those who say that it's really a promise not yet kept. But I'm actually all right with that. The notion that the Magna Carta is a statement of goals that can make society better. And I think that that keeps the Magna Carta a living and a breathing document, and it stands still as a symbol of justice winning over tyranny, even while principles of and concepts of freedom and fairness might be in flux. And I think that's an important thing about the Magna Carta. If I have a few minutes, I would, or a few seconds, 15 seconds, I would add to that the Liberals are committed to taking many steps to improve the democratic process in our country. And I won't have very much time to tell you about that. Hopefully it'll come up in some of the other questions, but it includes access to information and openness and transparency. Thank you.
I have to comment that I noted that my colleague failed to mention how her party voted on C-51. To me, that's the telling point on whether or not members of Parliament are willing to stand up and defend our charter rights. And that is a very key measure of whether or not we're willing to move forward. I think you're telling me that I didn't have a chance to rebut as well. Only one does? Well, there you are. I'll get into it in one of the next topics. Thank you.
My mic. Oh, there we go. I'm back. Actually, you can take the podium again because you'll be beginning this round, and this was almost a premonition because my next question is, what is your position on the recently passed anti-terrorism bill, C-51?
Thank you again to the law school for picking the right topics. As I was mentioning, the measure of how strongly you uphold the belief in the Charter of Rights, the Magna Carta, and the basic principles of transparency, openness, democratic rule, and the rule of law is how you vote in the House of Commons. And I think we had clear evidence of that in the vote on C-51. Of course, initially on C-51, for those of you who are not aware, that is the security bill that the government brought forward and that the Liberals and Conservatives voted for. We strongly stood as a team and voted against that. Why? Because former Supreme Court justices, former prime ministers, the Amnesty International, and more recently Louise Arbour have done a scathing review of that bill. And essentially that bill violates our basic charter rights. So when it comes down to standing with principle, even if some of the polls say maybe we don't support that you're going in that direction, we stand on principle. And that was a good indicator. So absolutely we will be rescinding that bill the minute we're elected.
With respect to C-51, I think something that we tend to overlook is that the legislation was proposed in the aftermath of a terrible shooting on Parliament Hill. And shortly after that, Canadians were absolutely clear in their desire to have their physical protection taken care of, as well as their personal rights upheld. And really what came to pass is a bill that brought in definite measures to immediately improve the security of Canadians, but it did not do enough to uphold and to protect our rights. The Liberal Party is committed to amending the parts of the bill that are offensive and problematic for us, and Mr. Trudeau has said that repeatedly in speeches across the country. What the Liberals did support is access to information sharing, because that had come from concerns articulated in the Air India inquiry by Justice Major. So the Liberals were in favor of proactive information sharing between some government agencies because we felt that was fundamentally important to safety. The Liberals proposed amendments to the legislation. A couple of those amendments were successful, but a number of them were not. One of the most key and fundamental issues that is problematic, obviously with C-51, is the lack of oversight, and every other member of our Five Eyes Alliance has sufficient and adequate oversight measures. We do not, and the Liberals are committed to amending the legislation in that regard. There are other issues with C-51 as well, but I think what I'd like to point out at this stage as well is that in addition to what Mr. Trudeau has said about the bill itself, there's the notion of working with communities to counter radicalism. And am I done? Yes. Oh dear. Thank you.
And you have 1 minute to reply this round.
Thank you very much. We also tabled many amendments, all of which were refused by the Conservative government. Not only that, they refused to hear the majority of expert witnesses, including the Privacy Commissioner. So if you've listened recently to the radio, you've heard Louise Arbour do a scathing analysis of that bill. Absolutely, that bill needs to be rescinded. Yes, we need to protect our security, but we also need to protect our freedoms. And it was absolutely unnecessary to expand the powers of CSIS without having proper oversight immediately in place. And it is absolutely outrageous that the government would erode our charter rights and to empower the judiciary to immediately override our rights without fair open hearing. So we stand by our position that we will rescind C-51. It was absolutely unnecessary and is a reprehensible bill.
What roles should the government play in preventing violence against women and investigating missing and murdered Aboriginal women in Canada?
It is the position of the Liberal Party that the government, in fact, does have a role to play, and we've supported the initiation of an inquiry with respect to missing and murdered Aboriginal women. You know, in 2014, the RCMP reported that 1,181 Aboriginal women were missing or murdered in this country, and the number is probably higher since then. 10,017 of those were murdered in a period of time, 1980 to 2012. And you'll recall that in December of 2014, our Prime Minister said, and I quote, "It isn't really high on our radar, to be honest, right now." And he went to call the situation of, went on to say that missing and murdered Aboriginal women, basically it's a crime that ought to be investigated by the police rather than a sociological problem. And of course, the Prime Minister added to that he's taking steps to deal with such crime, including tougher sentences for murder and for sexual assault. But that is, the position of the federal government is basically a position of one, because there are basically no other associations, organizations, groups who support the Conservative government position on that issue. The federal government is standing alone. Even an arm of the Organization of American States has said that an inquiry or some sort of a national action plan is required in order to get to the root of the problem. And it called on an initiative to be organized in consultation with Indigenous people and especially women. Again, the Liberals support an inquiry. Mr. Trudeau has called Prime Minister Harper on the wrong side of history on this issue, and we are committed to an inquiry. Thank you.
The issue of the need for action on missing and murdered Indigenous women is an issue I think that all opposition parties are on side with. The other side of the House, the Conservatives, are absolutely on the wrong side. It's not just a numbers game of how many Indigenous women, girls, and frankly boys and men that have been murdered or gone missing in this country. A more striking statistic is that Indigenous women are 7 times more likely to be murdered than non-Indigenous women. This simply has to end. And as Eleanor has mentioned, various UN bodies have come forward in support of this action, one of which is the UN Committee on the Elimination of the Discrimination Against Women. CEDAW actually came to Canada, did a review, and issued a report. And the 38 recommendations that they've issued, 2 of those include the actions that the opposition are calling for. One is the independent, and I would say judicial inquiry, and the second is a comprehensive action plan to address missing and murdered Indigenous women and boys. But we need an action plan that actually deals with the real issues and then isn't just completing a database on DNA, which frankly has been stalled as well. We need money for housing and First Nations, money for shelters so that women and girls can be safe and not head to the city. We need more money for affordable housing and shelters in our big cities where they come to escape. We need money for education on the reserve so women can become independently, economically independent. We need action on every one of the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations, which include the call for the inquiry. So absolutely, we have committed within the first 100 days of being in power, we will initiate the judicial inquiry. Why is it needed? Because if you have a judicial inquiry, as you know, as law students and legal scholars, it means that you can compel witnesses. We need to bring forward the attorney generals of all the provinces and territories, the leaders of First Nations, and we need the experts to come in and tell us exactly what exactly is going on and what the plan of action is. So absolutely, we need action. Thank you.
I would add to the comments I've already made that the Liberal Party does understand that there are various assorted government ministers and agencies dealing with a number of programs that affect Aboriginal people. And one of the benefits of, Linda mentioned some benefits of a national inquiry, but one of the other benefits would be that these groups that work in silos would be able to information share and in the end analysis come up with proposals and solutions that are sensible and appropriate. Thank you.
How do you see your party's fiscal policies as being different from the existing government's policies?
And that's me. Good question. Nice to see law students care about things other than case precedents. We see what happens in the economy and access to the economy. Human rights also plays a key role. The Charter of Rights, the basic rights to mobility, the basic rights to have an income and be secure. And a lot of that has to do with your fiscal policy. In the last decade, we have had the Conservative Government of Canada delivering a fiscal policy that has been rewarding the rich, the top 10%, and making it more difficult for the rest of Canadians to participate. So what are the kind of measures that we will do? Well, right off the top, we're proposing the $15 a day childcare. Why? Because many mothers or fathers don't have access to go back to work to help supplement their income or to advance their education so they can earn a decent income. So we actually have a bundle of issues that are actually going to help people participate in the economy. The other one is $15 a day for federal workers. There are many federal workers that work on less than that a day and are struggling to look after their families. We're going to lower small and medium industry taxes even more than the Conservatives because they're still the backbone of the Canadian economy. And we're going to provide an innovation tax credit. Why is that so critical to me? Because for 43 years, as an environmental lawyer and advocate, I have pushing for a cleaner energy strategy in this country. And we have had repeated governments that have simply put all the eggs in the fossil fuel basket and not in the innovation of a cleaner energy economy. So I think the innovation tax credit will help everybody from farmers to the energy sector to lawyers who can innovate, to the medical system who can innovate. We also want to put a lot more money into infrastructure, housing, and energy retrofits. My leader, Tom Mulcair, committed many billions of dollars at the FCM, Federation Canadian Municipality Conference here in Edmonton in the spring, and we are committed to delivering on that and a balanced budget. Thank you.
With respect to fiscal policy, the Conservatives hold themselves out as the paragons of good fiscal management, but in fact, Prime Minister Harper has the worst economic growth record of any Prime Minister since Mr. Bennett, and that was in the middle of the Depression. So in fact, in point of fact, it was the Liberals who have run 10 consecutive surplus budgets, left the Conservatives with billions of dollars, and the Conservatives turned that into a deficit, 8 straight years of deficit. And under Prime Minister Harper, the deficit has ballooned. I think Canadians all want the same thing. We want to build a better life for ourselves, for our children. We want to provide our citizens with upward mobility through economic opportunity. And that idea is really fundamentally under threat by a government that doesn't even think that there's a problem. So the Liberals would say that Prime Minister Harper's economic plan has failed. And the Liberal plan is to give money to those who need it most, which is unlike the Harper plan, which is to give money to those who need it least. The Conservatives have created a taxation scheme that's a hodgepodge of exemptions and policies that benefit the wealthy. The Liberal government will create a child benefit, which is one tax-free monthly child payment. And under this plan, 9 out of 10 families will receive more than they do under the current Conservative plan. The benefit is tied to family income, so it's income tested and it slowly phases out. There are no new administration costs because it will replace the child benefit that's currently in place. Liberals will also reduce tax on those in the middle income bracket, and you'll know from Mr. Trudeau's plan that it's to promote fairness to the middle class so that we can grow jobs and grow our economy. Thank you.
One key difference in the Liberal platform and the NDP platform is where we are placing the increase in taxes. For the Liberals, they want to increase some of the personal taxes. We are choosing to increase corporate taxes. Why would we do that? People say, oh, well, the economy, including in Alberta, is struggling right now. But have you seen the banks struggling? You know, the major oil companies are not struggling, and they can afford to pay a little bit more. And so there's no reason why Canada can't be on par with the corporate tax rate of our major trading partner, the United States, and frankly with Europe, as we pursue trade agreements with them. So that's where we're putting our emphasis. We're putting our emphasis on revenue generation so that we can have more money available for services for Canadians and sharing the benefits to those who need a leg up. It is very, very important as well, and I haven't heard mentioned this yet, diversification of our economy. I actually asked for the portfolio of Western economic diversification because I'm absolutely convinced that we can diversify our economy, including in moving towards a cleaner energy economy. Thank you.
Thank you. What role should the federal government play on the environmental front, and to what extent should it be sensitive to the needs of Alberta's oil sands industry?
The Liberal Party believes that Canada has lost credibility with respect to meeting our environmental commitments, that there has been very, very little leadership shown at the federal level, and in fact, the provinces have done much more on the environmental front. The Conservatives have basically allowed the oil sands to become the international poster child for climate change and have failed to get our oil resources to market. And so the Liberals support the development of oil sands, which are, of course, fundamental to this province and to our economy as well. But we support doing that in a responsible way. The current assessment process for those projects has become paralyzed and really bogged down, and there's a sense of there's a lack of public trust as well. And so what we need in this country is a clear and efficient process. We need reasonable and even-handed rules, clear beginning and end points with respect to the assessment process, decisions that companies can rely on. And Mr. Trudeau has committed to launching a public review of our environmental assessment process, and he will restore a robust environmental assessment to oil sands development. And we will do that by working with the provinces and the territories to make sure that efforts aren't being uselessly duplicated and money wasted. And we will work in conjunction and in partnership with civil society and with First Nations, Aboriginal people, Inuit, etc. And what really the Liberal Party stands for with respect to the environment and the economy is that both can coexist, that we can manage to safely bring resources to market with appropriate environmental safeguards. We need better oversight. We need more appropriate and strong penalties for those who breach environmental regulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gosh, can I have half an hour on this? As I mentioned in my opening remarks, when I was first elected, my priority was to table a bill that I actually brought forward back in the 1970s, if you can believe it, in Alberta, but it was crushed by the energy lawyers from Calgary. And that is my Environmental Bill of Rights. Why is that important? Because all of our environmental rights are being eroded. And what the Environmental Bill of Rights does, it extends the rights of Canadians to hold the government accountable. It imposes the duty on the government to uphold the public trust, which is the environment. And what it does is give concrete measures for access to information, the right to participate in decision-making, and the right to take the government to court if they're not enforcing or enacting strong environmental laws. We have, as Eleanor mentioned, over time, the Conservative government has been eroding and eviscerating our environmental laws. I worked for more than 40 years to develop strong, credible environmental law regime for Canada. And I knew when Stephen Harper got in, he would erode that. He would take away the federal presence in Alberta. It is exactly what he has done in his time in power. A prime example is coal-fired power. There is no reason in the world why we can't be shutting down our coal-fired power right now. It's been proven to be having health impacts. If you get a chance, I encourage you to go to the Pembina Institute seminar tomorrow, where they will be sharing that in the United States, they have been able to do exactly that with the same Canadian companies. We have been a laggard on biodiversity. We're now 32nd in the world in protecting biodiversity. Major cuts to environment, silencing of scientists, no more fact-based decision-making. So it is reprehensible, the measures that the Conservative government have done. In my opinion, we cannot afford them to have them one more day in office. So we are committed to being immediately moving to reenact all of those laws that were struck down, return the funding to Environment Canada, and free up our scientists so that they can speak and tell us the truth.
I would like to add to my previous comments a really fundamental part of what the Liberals believe in, and it really informs many of the topics that we've already discussed today, but in particular the issue of the environment, and that is absolutely evidence-based decision-making. And totally would echo Linda's comments with respect to the muzzling of scientists in this country and just the tragedy that has occurred as a result of that. As an example, I already alluded to the removal of the long-form census, but the elimination of the Office of the National Science Advisor as well, and the inviting or ensuring that there are PR people who attend environmental conferences with environmental scientists so that they can help the scientists deal with the media. That's another one of the things that the Harper government has done, and we would absolutely not permit that to happen. It's disgusting.
How should the government balance infrastructural spending with managing the national budget?
Well, it's very interesting the way that you're putting the question, and it's an important one, because infrastructure is a critical need right across the country. Federation of Canadian Municipalities have been identifying for quite some time the multi-billion-dollar deficit that we're facing. If you live in a community in my riding, for example, Bonnie Doon, you're probably fed up with infrastructure projects. But all the same, we do need to have our sewers replaced and our roads repaired and the potholes filled. And, will I say it, LRT expanded. Unless you're trying to get to 8 or the other way. Absolutely, we are supportive of infrastructure spending. Tom Mulcair was the first leader to come out at the FCM conference here in June and to announce our commitment. So specifically on infrastructure, what we are going to do is, first of all, increase it through addition to the gas tax transfer. By the end of our first term, that will reach $3.7 billion annually. But we're also going to provide predictable, dedicated long-term funding, and we will also invest additional funds in infrastructure, which includes, frankly, transit. We have long called for, Olivia Chow is a broken record on that, on a better transit plan, and we are committed to a 20-year plan on supporting transit building, investing $1.3 billion every year. But also, let's not forget housing. So when you look at the costing for infrastructure, we also have a dire need for affordable housing. And that's not just social housing, it's affordable housing for students, for visiting professors, young families. And we are committed to be putting 10,000 more new rental units over the next decade, and to partner with the cities in a long-term, stable investment in affordable housing. So yes, we need infrastructure projects. We've got a lot of unemployed construction workers and electricians who could work on this, and also engineering graduates, if any of you are in the room today. So absolutely, we support measures for infrastructure, but we have to balance that off with the other needs that the country is facing. Thank you.
Our economic competitiveness and, in fact, our quality of life as well will depend on our investment in modern infrastructure. And that covers everything from power, water, telecommunications, bridges, canals, pipelines, airports. All of these things make it possible for us to develop our resources, power our cities, and connect with one another and with the world. Municipalities are limited in what they can raise by taxation, and so we need to rely on and have the involvement of the federal government in these initiatives. And I think a fundamental difference between the Liberals and the other parties is, in fact, on the issue of infrastructure investment. Mr. Trudeau was here a couple of weeks ago. He spoke to the Federation of Municipalities about infrastructure investment, and he recently made one of the most to me, important announcements with respect to infrastructure spending that is absolutely unprecedented with respect to this country. And it basically involves a massive infrastructure expenditure over a period of time. That infrastructure expenditure will be used three ways. It'll be used for public transport. It will be used for social infrastructure, which includes affordable housing, seniors facilities, early learning facilities and childcare, recreational and cultural facilities, and lastly, in green infrastructure. And that will include a broad assortment of projects, including water and wastewater facilities, clean energy, cleaning up contaminated sites, etc. The Liberal plan, because you had asked about financing as well, will include innovative methods of financing, including the establishment of a Canadian infrastructure bank and the issuance of what we call green bonds. And I invite you actually to go on the Liberal website. That is actually just a showpiece of the Liberal platform, and I would invite all of you to go on the website and read more detail. There's lengthy detail on the website about Mr. Trudeau's plan for infrastructure investment in the economy. Thank you.
I must say I was a little surprised to hear Ellen include pipelines in infrastructure, and I hope she's not suggesting the Government of Canada will help to finance those. But I am pleased that she mentioned green infrastructure. Absolutely, we are at a moment in time, 2015, where we have to make hard decisions. We're sending our Premier and our Prime Minister to be elected and Environment Minister to Paris, to the international conference. And it's absolutely critical that we get behind our governments and vote in governments that are going to be supporting reinvestment in green infrastructure. We are about to build multi-billion-dollar transmission lines from coal-fired power, and there are applications for export. Now is the time to make a decision on the direction that we want to go in our country on our energy supply. We are absolutely behind a Canadian energy strategy, but opening the door to the public to participate. Thus far, we have an energy strategy that's simply to build transmission lines and pipelines. We need to open up the agenda and to move forward on genuine plan for green infrastructure for Canada.
How will your party invest in Canada's post-secondary institutions? How will your party invest in Canada's post-secondary institutions?
You know, the Liberal Party believes that a strong economy is one where every Canadian has a real and a fair chance at success, and that includes the chance to get a quality education and a good job. And of course, education is in fact the key to equality and to opportunity. The Liberal Party is committed to increasing the number of Canadians with university, college, and skilled trade credentials while lowering the costs that families need to pay for this. And we really believe that making post-secondary education affordable is crucial to Canada's economic prosperity. We need an educated and a skilled middle class in order to diversify our economy and make sure that future generations have opportunity. You know, I know for me, my university days were some of the best of my life, and it isn't just that university prepares you for a job. Certainly that's part of it, but it lets you meet creative, bright, and incredible people. It provides you, teaches you social responsibility and a broad knowledge of the world around you. And more importantly than that, though, and I've already alluded to it, is equality of opportunity. And right now, about 50% of Canadians have some level of post-secondary education, be that college, university, post-technical, or apprenticeships. But statistics tell us that 70% of jobs in the coming decades will need some sort of education beyond high school. The Liberal Party believes that the federal government has a role to play, that we can, in fact, support economic success and job security across the country. And the exact detail of what that will look like from the point of view of dollar expenditure and in what format, I have to leave it. It's going to be announced before E-Day. Thank you.
So why a federal role in education? I can't tell you the number of times where I stood in the House of Commons and we've asked on a question about advanced education, environment, health, and told, oh, that's a provincial responsibility. And frankly, I wanted to say, then why are we paying for your chauffeur? I am not saying that jokingly. We need our federal government to step up to the plate on all these areas of importance, including advanced education. It's the ticket to a family's security and future, and for their children and their grandchildren. So, as Eleanor has said, we need to ensure equitable access to advanced education, whether it's at university or whether it's at one of our technical colleges. We currently have 26 post-secondary institutions, and I hold equally important to the University of Alberta, King's University, and NAIT South Campus. I've been thrilled to visit the Lethbridge Renewable Energy Centre, and I'm working closely with students at the NAIT Renewable Energy Centre. These are the people of our future. We need to make sure that they are getting schooled in the future sectors. University of Alberta is the province's flagship. Over $12 billion contributed to the provincial GDP. We're talking about contributions to our economy, not just the education of our youth. And yes, it has to be equitable. I'm proud of this university for the support for Aboriginal students, but we need to put a lot more support into helping people to participate. What our party has done is we have tabled many times over the Post-Secondary Education Act so that we would be held legally binding for specific earmarked transfers to the provinces. So when there's a social transfer, a specific amount would go for advanced education, and the provinces couldn't fudge with that. It would impose criteria on the transfers and mandatory quality and accessibility. In other words, start lowering student tuition, start ensuring access to advanced education to everybody in our province. And we also need to be supporting access to childcare and to housing, because yes, tuition's expensive and so are buying the books, but so is paying for childcare if you are married students and the housing. Thank you.
The Liberal Party also believes that we have an economic and a moral imperative to invest in First Nations education, and Mr. Trudeau has already made an announcement in that regard. Less than half of students on reserves actually graduate from high school. And so the Liberal Party has committed to core funding an immediate investment of $515 million in annual core funding for kindergarten through grade 12 for First Nations. And I think that's an important aspect to remember with respect to the Liberal position on education. Thank you.
We'll now invite the audience to ask questions, and each candidate will get 1 minute to respond.
We'll start a line at each back corner of the room, and if you have a question, if you would like to sort of form a line where there's an open space, we'll bring the microphone to you. Thank you.
Okay, I wanted to thank you both for coming. My question is actually directly for Linda. You had mentioned about the $15 a day minimum wage for federally regulated positions. I'm under the impression that already 99% of federally regulated employees are already at $15 a day, or $15 an hour or more. Can you answer about how many people this is actually going to affect?
Thanks for the question. It's been asked a number of times, and we've replied a number of times. My understanding is 100,000 workers. We think that it's fair that those who are in the bottom of the barrel are the ones who we should first be protecting. Yes, there are many professionally qualified, well-paid federal employees, but there are many who are working in the service-type sector who are simply making minimum wage and struggling to get by. We set the bar there, and we're happy to see the province of Alberta follow suit.
Hello there. I have a question for both of you. So historically, Canada has been one of the countries that has been most welcoming to refugees, and the Harper government has been incredibly stonewall towards welcoming people to our country. Germany has recently announced that they are willing to let in 500,000 refugees from the Syrian crisis a year, and I was just wondering what your party's positions are on accepting new refugees into Canada.
Mr. Trudeau made an announcement in that regard a few days ago, and he said that the Liberal Party is committed to allowing 25,000 refugees into this country forthwith. And in addition, he is very supportive of a plan that was implemented in earlier refugee crises, which is to send teams actually to the country that's in crisis so that whatever processing needs to take place can take place there. And he's committed, because the notion behind that, of course, is to make that process expedient and to enable refugees to come to this country as quickly as possible. And I think that's a very sensible approach. And so, again, the Liberal Party is deeply committed in that regard, and the position of the Harper government is untenable and unfortunate. Thank you.
I want to thank you for raising the question. We have put forward a 5-point clear plan. And I just want to reiterate that we have been standing up in the House of Commons the last 2 years demanding that the Conservative government actually deliver on their promise of 10,000 refugees. To date, we still don't know exactly how many are on the ground. We have committed, if we're elected, to bring that 10,000 by the end of this year. That will be a big task, but here's how we propose it can be made to happen. We will appoint a Syrian refugee coordinator, pulling resources from various departments like Foreign Affairs, Citizenship, Immigration, and get them on the ground. Secondly, increase the presence of Canada's diplomatic and immigration officials in situ in the region. Third, work with Turkey and other affected countries who are bearing the brunt of the influx, but also putting a lot of hurdles in the way. Fast-track private sponsorship with no cap. I have been conferring over the last 2 years with churches and other organizations who have been kept waiting, who are fully willing to take in Syrian and other refugees. We need to remove that cap, and we need to remove the red tape. And finally, increase Canada's contributions to humanitarian assistance agencies like the UNHCR.
Yeah, I have a question for both candidates. It's how do we get this campaign to come to the real issues, like economy and the refugee crisis, certainly important, but how can we breathe without fresh air? The economy is really just the ecology is way more important. And I think there's some real difference there between the NDP and the Liberals. Like Trudeau has been supporting the Keystone Pipeline about a year ago, while Obama clearly said, well, we can consider it if you improve your environmental policies. Also, the Liberals now, they're proposing to have a cap and trade for the carbon sequestration. And that's just putting money in and really do nothing, just like we described for Kyoto. But the Liberals really, they just signed it, but didn't do very much. And that gave Harper the opportunity to just sign it off completely. So there is some real issues, and how do we change that?
I think I could probably answer for both of us. I believe that the Liberal Party is deeply committed to environmental issues, and I would invite you to do, sir, what I had indicated earlier with respect to other important issues in this election. That is, maybe go to the Liberal website and read the Liberal Party commitment to the environment, because I think it will help you understand where the party stands on those issues. And I think both of, yeah, it is. We don't support cap and trade from a federal perspective, and so I think if you go on probably both of our websites and read, you'd feel more confident that this is, in fact, that is the environment, and the environment is and its relationship to the economy is indeed a fundamental issue in this election. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much for that question. I agree 100%. Energy security is one of the most critical issues that we're facing. It's reprehensible that even George Bush put in place an energy security bill for the United States, and we're still looking at trying to ship it out as fast as possible, and no plan of action for our security, which also includes protection of the environment and our health. We've recently seen Dr. Vipond and others coming forward with the actual medical information that coal-fired power is impacting our health. So we need a clear action plan to act now on clean electricity, but we also need an action plan to deal with our oil sands, which the emissions will double within less than a decade. That is what is holding up, frankly, a lot of our pipelines, including the Keystone, and what's holding up our pipeline to the West Coast is the abject failure of the government to settle Aboriginal treaties. So we need an action plan that shows that the government gets how these are connected. We need to restore the federal environmental assessment process so everybody who is potentially impacted can have a voice, and we have proper review in advance of the environmental impacts and determination whether they can actually be mitigated.
Time.
And we need action on the major emitters. And we believe that cap and trade is the only way to go in the major emitters in Saskatchewan and Alberta.
So I think your answers to that last question there were somewhat related to my question. First of all, I thank you for the strong remarks on the environment, because I think Harper has made us a bit of an embarrassment on the world stage over the past 10 years. I did notice that about a month ago, an NDP candidate, Linda McQuaig, came out and said for us to reach our carbon emission targets, we'd have to leave some oil in the ground. And she took a lot of flack for that, and she kind of had to retract that comment, which I think is a little ridiculous, because of course we're going to have to leave some oil in the ground if we want to meet our targets, or the targets that we should be trying to reach. So my question is just, I think Linda was starting to answer it, and same with Eleanor, what exactly should we be doing to return to a position of leadership on reducing our carbon emissions?
Should I just go first on this? Thank you very much for your question. Just to correct, Linda McQuaig actually didn't say we have to leave the oil in the ground. She said a number of people are saying that, and that includes the International Energy Agency, who have been clear that there's two measures we need to do: provide energy security for the world and address climate change. And in Canada, we simply have not met the mark. And so we need to be addressing all sources. Yes, we need to be addressing the rising emissions from the oil sands, but we also need to address the impacts of coal-fired power, which is frankly unnecessary. It's an archaic system of producing electricity and powering our homes. TransAlta Utilities, are one of the major generators, already struck a deal with Washington State, and they're shutting down their coal. What we need is political will. We need political will to have a Canadian clean energy strategy that will address both access to energy, economic prosperity, and protection of the environment, and addressing climate change. And we are fully prepared to do that, but the only way to do that is to be elected and remove the current Conservative government.
The Liberal Party, too, as I've indicated, is deeply committed to issues affecting the environment. And I don't believe that I can add really much further to that, at this particular point in time, other than maybe to stress again what I spoke about regarding the infrastructure plan, and that part of that certainly does involve an investment in green infrastructure, which I think will be fundamentally important not only to the economy, we need to look at alternate energy sources as well, but to issues with respect to climate change. Thank you.
So my question is pretty basic. What do you really think of Stephen Harper? No, that was joking aside. You've went over several issues today. So I guess just to kind of summarize, what do you think is the most central or the most important issue facing voters in the upcoming election, and why should we vote for your party as an answer to that? So what do you think is the most important issue voters are facing in this upcoming election, or what should be the main issue they're deciding on, and why should your party be the one to vote for, and how are they dealing with that issue? In 1 minute.
I think you would have got the drift from hearing the discussion here today that the erosion of democracy is the key issue. And frankly, you're going to face it immediately when you go to the poll to exercise your franchise. I'm already hearing of people where they have a new driver's license and it's not being accepted. We got the concern with First Nations, we got the concerns with the seniors, we got the concerns with people who are living on our streets. So that's the first measure that we're going to be facing. That's representative of the Unfair Elections Act that set about taking away our charter rights to exercise our vote. And it goes from there. So I think the future of our democracy rests on your right to have a say in the energy future, your right to have a say in how we spend your tax dollars. I think the future of democracy is what is most critical in this country. I am hoping that a good number of the law students that graduate from here are going to go in the direction that I did, not necessarily in practice, although I encourage you to do that for a while because you get practical experience, but work on advocacy to protect the rights of Canadians. Thank you.
I believe on this day where we're celebrating the Magna Carta, as well as the fact that we're a couple of weeks away from the federal election, I agree with Ms. Duncan with respect to what the fundamental issue, I think, in this election is. And it is, in fact, democracy. And those are, I can go back to the first comments that I made just in my introduction today. And I would like to mention as well, because I didn't get probably enough chance to say what I wanted to say about it, but Mr. Trudeau has unveiled a very lengthy plan. I believe there are 32 policy points that have to do with what he would do if elected to improve democracy in this country, starting with the unmuzzling of scientists, bringing back the long-form census, using data-driven decision-making, using a better process with respect to government appointments, involving Canadians in policy making. There's a vast proposal with respect to changes that can be made, democratic reform, reforming of the Senate. And so again, I'm out of time, but I would invite you to go to the Liberal website and see what the Liberal Party has to say with respect to open and transparent government and improving democracy in our country. Thank you.
So I'd just like to thank you for bringing up all these issues that we have face Canadians, but I also think it's important that we look to our history where it's important that we look at internationally. So I just want to ask both of you what your stance is that your party will improve on international aid. Like, what will your party be doing to improve on international aid?
If you take yourselves back to 2005, the 2005 budget, when the Liberals had a minority government, my former leader, Jack Layton, negotiated a change in the budget, and that kept the Liberals in power. And what did he do? He took some of the, I think it was $3 to $5 billion that were going to be used to cut corporate taxes and put it into a number of bigger priorities, and one of those included foreign aid. We have always stood for standing up for our responsibilities in the international arena to provide foreign aid, whether that's humanitarian aid, whether that's participating fully in dialogues such as an international climate change regime. So absolutely, it's time for us to be delivering on our promises about children, our promises about protecting the environment, our promises about maintaining human rights and rule of law.
The Liberals, too, are committed to international aid, to increasing fundamentally the amount of international aid, and that's all really I can say about that at this particular point in time. Thank you.
This one's kind of directed for you, Ms. Duncan. Given that most Canadians support Senate reform rather than abolition and disagree with Tom Mulcair when he said he's never met a hardworking senator, why abolition, and is that even tenable anymore?
Thanks. I'm kind of surprised this wasn't on the list of issues. Before I was elected, I actually spent my time appearing before the Senate and then having those reports gather dust. I'll tell you, there's not a single time when I've participated in a vote or a debate or a parliamentary committee review where we have reviewed any of the work of the Senate. It was an invention to protect the upper class, and the provinces who had a Senate did away with them. I mean, why do we need a House of Lords in Canada? What is the purpose of the Senate? There are lots of alternatives that we can move in. I don't believe that it has served the purpose of a so-called sober second thought. My ancestor was one of the original senators. He reluctantly joined creating the Federation and then becoming a senator. What he believed in was good governance. I believe that instead we should strengthen the House of Commons, strengthen our committee review process so it's on par with the congressional reviews in the United States. We have a lot of high-caliber people in Canada, everybody from Louise Arbour to other retired Supreme Court justices. We have esteemed academics. They could be participating in a lot of reviews, coming to the committee, advising us. I do not see any purpose anymore for the Senate, despite the fact that highly qualified, hardworking members, including from my community, have participated. I've respected their contribution, but it is time to say goodbye to the Senate.
The Liberal Party believes that the Senate does need to change, that the status quo is not an option. We also believe, though, that the solutions that have been proposed by the Conservatives and by the NDP as well are really not workable, as they will require protracted rounds of constitutional and messy negotiations. And we're of the view that it's the Liberal Party that has the more sensible approach, and that's essentially to end the partisan nature of the Senate so that it can better serve its core functions, which are legislative review and in-depth study, and again, the place of sober second thought. That is, in fact, why Mr. Trudeau removed the senators from the Liberal caucus, and it is the Liberal Party's position that we will create a new non-partisan, merit-based, broad and diverse process with respect to Senate appointments so that we can improve the Senate, and that will be a fundamentally important change with respect to our democratic process. Thank you so much.
My question is to Ms. Duncan. Mr. Mulcair has promised to balance the budget within 1 year of his term. Isn't that a bit of a false promise, especially when we're in a recession right now? Was to say that when you get elected, he looks at the books and says, well, we didn't know how bad it was. So I just wanted your opinion and comment on that.
Thank you very much for the question. I can't give you the detailed breakdown, as Eleanor said. We're halfway through the election, and the details of how we're going to get there are yet to be revealed, including to the candidates. That's the way campaigns go. Why are we committing to that? I and my colleagues have sat in the House of Commons all of this time under the Conservative government and been concerned that the government is simply downloading to future generations the costs of their decisions. And it's not just our deficit, it's our debt. We're fully convinced that by creating a budget that is more equitable, that deals with the real needs of Canadians, we can actually have a balanced budget by the end of the next budget. We aren't saying by the end of this fiscal year, by the end of the first budget that we bring in. It is possible. We don't need to have fiscal policies that advantage only the top 10%. The Liberal government of the Liberal Party have also spoken against those. So we firmly believe that we can continue to deliver services and not do the kind of cuts that the Liberals did in the mid-1990s. We believe we can deliver a balanced budget, and that's the direction that a government should do.
And this will be the final question of the day.
My question is just for Ms. Duncan as well. In regards to the NDP childcare plan, as I understand it, 40% of that funding is to come from the provinces. Now, since that's come out, multiple premiers have been at least hesitant about forking over this money, as provinces are already cash-strapped, and the degree to which the NDP may recognize previous provincial investments could affect the number of childcare spaces that Mulcair is promising. So my question, I guess, is how does the NDP plan to sell this to provinces, and to what extent would you guys recognize previous provincial investments in childcare?
Thanks for the question. I'm glad to see a young gentleman raising that. It's important to both mothers and fathers or partners who are raising children. We've been very clear that absolutely we will consult with the provinces and territories in this fiefdom of under the Conservative federal government, where they don't talk to the provinces and territories. Your choice is two ways. Either you make childcare affordable so everybody can participate equitably in advanced education or the employment, or you don't. Successive Liberal and Conservative governments have promised to create childcare spaces and didn't. And so we have this dearth of affordable childcare, including in our city. So this is the mechanism that we've come forward with. Yes, we will be negotiating with the provinces and territories. It's my understanding that the Governor of Alberta here is very open to discussing this. So we've made that one of our top priorities. We think that it's fair, and we think everybody should be able to equitably participate in our economy, in our society.
I'd like to thank everyone for participating in this informative and provoking debate. We hope that this has been useful for everyone involved. And as previously mentioned, this event was brought to you in celebration of the Magna Carta by the Law and Social Media class. Our next event will be October 9th, and we hope to see you all then. On behalf of the U of A Faculty of Law, I would like to thank Ms. Duncan and Ms. Olszewski for taking the time to attend this event.